Alright, so I've got here is basically my cheat sheet. Anything you see in black is the WRX. Anything in blue is STI. Now, as you can see, 90% of it is STI. Obviously, the engine can be either. Doesn't really make a difference. Bolt pattern on all EJs is the same. Clutch and flywheel is going to be the STI. Transmission, 6-speed. Interestingly enough, the clutch slave cylinder has to match the 6-speed because it's a pull style, but the master cylinder, the hard line, and the rubber line can all be from the WRX. You do not need to swap those over. My clutch works just fine. Front axles depend on your front hubs. If you've got WRX hubs, keep the WRX axles. If you're using STI hubs, you're going to need STI axles. Obviously, shifter is going to be a different length for the 6-speed. That needs to match your body style. 08 to 21 are all the same, but you cannot use 04, 05, 06, 07. That has to match the body. The drive shaft, STI length, has to be off the STI and it has to match the body. However, the 08 to 14 and the 15 to 21 are different. So if you've got a 08 to 14, you need a 08 to 14 STI drive shaft. Then we're going to want to have a matching rear diff. The gear ratio may be different, so you want to make sure that the diff matches. The flange for the drive shaft is different. And because you have to run, or you don't have to, but because you should run an STI rear diff, most people do, you're going to need to match the axles to the diff because the inner hubs are a different diameter. I'll show you guys how I did all this. It was a super easy swap. Everything basically bolted right in. Also, shift knob, that's a terrible drawing of a shift knob, but you need the 6-speed, or you should use the 6-speed shift knob, because the reverse lockout lever will hit the 5-speed shift knob and you won't be able to get into reverse. So that's an issue. I modified my 5-speed knob to work for now, but I have a 6-speed knob on the way. So yeah, pretty simple. If you have any questions, refer back to this. Also, the DCCD will be the next video, so stay tuned for that. Alright, so here are the actual parts that we're going to need. First and foremost, obviously the 6-speed transmission. This one's out of a 15 plus STI. So we're going to need, because we are doing a 6-speed that has a 1.1 to 1 transfer ratio, we also need a 354 rear diff. Now the rear diff in the 08 to 14 WRX is a 390 and will not work. So because it has a 1.1 to 1 transfer ratio, this comes out to 390, but a 390 diff would not work. So that's a 354. Because we're doing the rear diff, we also need the rear axles. We need the shifter, obviously. We need the 6-speed specific drive shaft. The 15 plus STI drive shaft is 1 inch longer than the 08 to 14 STI drive shaft. So I actually went with a carbon shaft. That's a long story. Couldn't find a steel one. Decided to upgrade. You'll need an STI transmission mount. You don't need the cross member, although the STI cross member is a slight upgrade. So keep that in mind. Other things you'll need is the slave cylinder and the clutch hose, and the STI specific clutch and flywheel, and also the starter, I'm told, is different. So that's it for the parts list. What you're not seeing here is obviously the drive shaft and the clutch and flywheel, but we'll pull those out later. So obviously I'm not going to be able to do a step-by-step guide on this because it's a very pretty intensive job, but basically we're going to start taking the transmission out as if we were replacing the clutch. Now, I'm probably not going to film this, but I'm going to start with the underhood processes. Going to take out the intercooler, slave cylinder, top transmission mount, the dog bone mount they call it, down pipes, starter, get all that stuff out of the way, and then probably move on to the underside of the car after that. Alright, so we got the stuff under the hood done. All we've done so far is take out the catback. Next we're going to take out the drive shaft, down pipe, front axles. We got some chassis bracing. We have to take that all out. I'm a little worried that the 6-speed is going to interfere with my external wastegate setup, but hopefully it doesn't. We'll see. And yeah. Alright, so we're still just following the standard clutch replacement procedure. Next thing we're going to do is take out the front axles. We've got out the downpipe and the drive shaft. Then we're going to disconnect the shifter from the transmission. Once we get these front axles out, we can actually start disconnecting the transmission from the engine. And then everything after that will just be 6-speed specific stuff. So I'm just moving through this now. Let's get these axles out. Alright, so now that the front axles are out, which we just disconnected the top strut bolts and pulled them out, now we can start disconnecting the cross member, the shifter, and the bell housing bolts. And then once you do that, trans will come out, and then it's on to the 6-speed install. Alright, so for reference, the 6-speed is massive compared to the 5-speed. Especially if it didn't have those blast plates on the side, making it look bigger than it actually is. That thing is just a beast. Now the next thing we're going to do is transfer the 5-speed harness for the reverse light switch and the neutral safety switch. And then that way it'll just be a plug and play. This is what we got. 5-speed harness comes off. 6-speed harness comes off. You got to cut off all these zip ties and whatnot. 5-speed harness is going to plug in right here. That's your reverse light switch and your neutral safety switch. This black and green, that's your driver controlled center diff. We're going to save those wires and cut off everything else and transfer it over from the 5-speed. Alright guys, I forgot to film the rear diff, so I'm sorry, but ready, check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, right? Pop the axles out and it drops straight down. Now we could just hammer the axles out on each side like this and then do it backwards for install, and that's it. Piece of cake. R180 is in. So that temp sensor is the fill. That's the drain. Alright, so we're rolling through this install. You know, we got a lot of shit put back up. I didn't really see anything that was tricky at all. It was really just basically doing a clutch job with the installation of all the STI parts. Now I've got the STI starter in there. Wish I would have got a shot of this, but the WRX clutch line, master, all that stuff will literally just bolt right up to the slave cylinder. Let's see if I can turn flash on. There we go. So the only thing I did was unbolt that clutch line from the WRX slave and then bolt it right on to the STI slave, and that's perfect. So the only issue I'm having now is with the intercooler. The intercooler bracket for the WRX does not work with the Process West with the 6-speed, so I'm having a little bit of an issue there. Yep, gonna have to figure something out with that. Alright, so please note, if you have a verticooler and you're doing a 6-speed swap, they are not friends. First and foremost, the bracket for the transmission has to ship from Australia, so if you're anywhere besides Australia, you're basically screwed. I made this, my welder was out of gas, so I had to nut and bolt everything together. I tried to tack the nuts on there to make install a little easier, and you could see the hideous weld from not having any gas. But that said, this is only temporary until the actual brackets come from Australia. So, but who knows, that could take months. Also, the one thing I didn't show was the shifter assembly swap. Super easy. This metal bracket down here, you unbolt that with 5 bolts. The metal bracket lifts up, and then basically everything else drops out through the bottom. So it's super easy. Then you just feed the new shifter up through the bottom. This rubber just gets pinched underneath. You know, the metal clamp just clamps down on it. Super easy. Whole job was a walk in the park. Only issue I have is I've got a hill assist light. I don't know why. That could be because the gear ratios are different. Maybe it needs retuned. I don't know. That's the only thing that I have. Only problem. So if you remember earlier, this is the reverse lockout I was talking about. Okay, so I actually cut this knob. I've got a 6-speed knob on the way. Obviously the H pattern will be the same, or will be different rather, meant to say. But in order to get into reverse gear, you got to pull up on this, and that's to prevent you from shifting into reverse by accident when you're meaning to shift into 6th. That would not be good. But for that reason, the 6-speed knob is different. I also need to put on, you know, the boot and all that. But this is what I was talking about. I cut mine. I cut like an inch off. This thing used to be like out to here, like right about there, and it really wouldn't work. But I cut it down basically right to where the threads start, and it still lets me get into reverse. So not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but for now it works. I can still get into reverse, you know. So there's that.